Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Vet Talks, the podcast hosted by the EVBB and powered by MetaVet Plus. My name is Antonio Gennarelli, I'm your host, and today I have a very special guest once again with us, is Christin Cieslak, Head of Programs and Stakeholder Engagement at EAEA, European Association for the Education of Adults. So thank you, Christin, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, really. So, Christin, we work a lot together, so really it is a pleasure for us to have colleagues from another association here for our podcast, for our session. And, our first question is always for you to introduce yourself a little bit, to share with us your journey, how did you end up on this armchair and all the way through Brussels and then at the EAEA.
Gladly, thanks for asking. So I originally studied gerontology, which for everybody who doesn't know is the science of the elderly, which I enjoyed very much, but it was starting a little bit too late, if that makes sense. So I wanted to offer opportunities and not so much just ease, if that makes sense. So our university back then pushed a lot towards a retirement home leadership, and I didn't want that. And then one Christmas, we got a educational trip to Brussels gifted. So I really liked the atmosphere, and I really liked everything about the work in Brussels. So I tend to stay on the policy side of things and decided to study adult education. And from there, I made my way over EAEA, working as the project manager for the Central Support Service, back then in Birmingham before Brexit, which then led me to meet Gennarelli at an event. And after the CSS project was wrapped up, I was invited to join EAEA, and that's how I ended up on this chair.
Welcome to this chair. I mean, I'm sure that now it's really fitting the purpose, but we knew this already for sure, also before. But I see that you've been working on adult education throughout your whole professional career and also before in academia. And I'm sure that whatever you learned along this path, I mean, it's still feeding into what the EAEA does and also what you do. So maybe perhaps you want to, share a bit more on what you're actually working right now at the EAEA.
Of course. Maybe just to tell you a little bit about where EAEA is coming from. So, because we just celebrated our 70th birthday, so we were founded in 53. Thank you. And we're now having 120 members from about 40 different countries, European countries, give or take. So what we're doing is we are trying to be some sort of translator for everything that happens in Brussels, and at the same time represent our members. And we do that through different means and through different activities, but mainly through communication and information providing.
That's really the key to translating and to make sure that whatever happens around here, and as an association we do the same in vocational training, that is well understood on what happens actually on the ground and vice versa, because then it becomes a very good dialogue. And speaking of which, this dialogue that you have with European institutions because us we are in the middle. So for us, advocacy is really a key element of what we do, but also what EAEA does. And I feel that part of it is always hearing from one side and processing the information and sharing it with the European institutions here and backwards. How do you feel that you are positioned in this sense here in Brussels?
Well, over the last 7 decades, we were able to establish ourselves and get into different working groups and different expert groups. And I actually have to read those because they're like the titles are fantastic. So we are part of the European Commission's Adult Education and Equal Opportunities Working Group, the UNESCO's CCNGO, and the Councils of Europe Conference of International NGOs. So we sit in those and we talk about European adult education, but not only that, we're taking all the information and input we're getting, the feedback through our country reports. We have annual country reports, and we get all this information from our members, and then we try to put these into those expert groups and communicate to the European Commission and the other institutions what is happening on the grassroots level.
I see. I think these working groups, perhaps even if not so well known at the grassroots level, I feel that they are the right space for conversation with European institutions, especially if the agenda setting is shared with us and the institutions together, no?
Yes, and we also try to communicate back and raise awareness also about the grassroots level itself. So we have our annual Grundtvig Award that we're using to put a spotlight on extraordinary adult education projects that are rather very innovative or very impactful. So that is a way we try to support European learning and education. And when we also joined the Confintea 7 in Morocco, there was a final declaration that actually took over our exact wording. So we were very happy that we could actually impact policies to that level. And another thing that we achieved and that we're quite excited about is that we had an interest group on lifelong learning, where we would talk twice a year with members of the European Parliament and keep them up to date about European learning. And we managed to, this year, together with our sister organization, the Lifelong Learning Platform, to transfer that into an intergroup at the European Parliament.
Christin, you mentioned that you represent, in fact, an association that covers 120 members over that. I believe that the growth was over the years, so 70 years of growth. It must have been gradual, with step back, step forward, of course, but how challenging was this to create a common culture among the members, among the work together, because eventually it will all have to come through here and then to Brussels for you to also provide this information back to the intergroups, for example.
Absolutely. So it's been challenging and it's been quite a journey. You have to also bear in mind that a couple of years ago, when I was joining EAEA, we were only 5. So we were literally a handful of people. We only know in the last 4 or 5 years or so, we grew to 12 people. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing is that any NGO, any civil society organization faces is that we have to do a whole lot with not so much. And we do have to use the funding that we're having in the most productive way. So we have to be very strategic and thoughtful in the way we approach things. But that is not the only thing we have to bear in mind. We also have to think about the vast majority, wait 1 second, this needs to go out, diversity. The vast diversity of people we are representing, but also how different the organizations and people are that we're talking to. So when you think about adult learners, you think about everybody who surpasses a certain age until however age they are. So we have different age groups, we have different socioeconomic backgrounds, we have different educational backgrounds, we have traditionalized education, we have education traumata. So no other learning group is so diverse in itself. So we already have a very diverse needs and requirements on that side, but then also our members are very different from another. We have small organizations that are very grassroots, we have bigger organizations that are operating on a whole new level, and we have other umbrella organizations being our members. So even our members are completely different in how they operate. So this is also a massive challenge. But on the other hand, it also offers a lot of opportunities, a lot of communication channels, and a lot of creative ways to approach them and communicate with those organizations and people. But yes, those are a couple of the challenges, the very limited funding and the broad variety of people that we're talking about and that we're representing.
It is a bit also the motto of the European Union, united in diversity. So somehow we will have to make it work. But I'm sure that after so many years and after 70 years of work, there are many things that you have achieved, for sure, in bringing together this wide network. And is there perhaps anything else that you would like to mention as a success in this sense? Or
we are actually having been induced into the international Adult and Continuing Education Hall of Fame recently as an entire organization after our president has also been induced there, and we are very happy about that. And we,
congratulations.
yes, thank you very much. And that's one of the things that makes us understand that we are seen and it does something, our work.
That the work is impactful and also recognized by international organizations, and I mean it will stay also for many years after us. The EVBB is more than 30 years old, the EAEA is 70 years old, but I believe that for many years we will be talking about education, adult education, vocational education and training. And how do you think, for example, now thinking of us as associations, now maybe we address similar target groups, similar recipients of training and education, and despite sometimes informal education, non-formal education. So despite our differences and despite the differences between our members, of course, as a training center, adult centers, how can we work together, and how do you see particular areas where the synergy can be valuable and good opportunities can be within reach?
That is a really important question. We, EVBB and EAEA, everybody loves a good acronym in Brussels, we do have a memorandum of understanding. And I think it's absolutely crucial, and the importance can barely be overestimated. We are coming from different sectors, yes, but what we have to do these days, first and foremost, is to, and here comes a European policy bingo card, we have to break the silos, and we do that. And we open our networks for each other, which also means we learn from each other, we connect, and it sounds very dramatic, but it's also important that we do that, because we do not have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from each other, and maybe the VET sector has different challenges, maybe the VET sector has different obstacles to overcome. This being said, we can definitely look how challenges are overcome in the different sectors, learn from each other, connect, and then also speak with one voice. So if there is an initiative or a white paper that's been published by the Commission and we have something to say about that, which we mostly do, thankfully, then we can join forces and have more impact if we publish a joint statement rather than each little organization for themselves. And so we stay a bit united as an education sector, and we have a little bit more power.
I very much agree, and I strongly support what you say, Christin. Why? Because one colleague from another community of practice that we work with once said that it's not about the pie itself, it's about making the pie bigger. So this is how we create this true impact, that through different, for example, organizations or different backgrounds, in any case, what we will do together is much more meaningful, much more relevant and impactful, be here or also back in our countries and regions. I mean, we work a lot with also local training providers. I feel that this is really the way forward in a way. And in fact, speaking of a way forward, because now also a question on how we see things ahead. Now it's, as time of recording, the new commission is being established as of now, so it's really a time of transition, but it's true that it is always in transition and evolution. But at this time and day, how do you see that? Is anything in particular, any trends that in adult education is taking foot, or something that perhaps in the next years we'll see more emerging?
What we're looking at long term is to change a little bit the way we talk about education. So what we have seen over the last decade, 1.5 decades, is that the language we are using to speak about education, especially the official language that's coming from the European institutions, is more and more almost instrumentalized. So we are talking a certain way about education and learning that we would like to adjust, to steer it a little bit more in a almost healthier direction.
To make it easier to understand, this always, but not in a way that can be used for certain political purposes in a way, because education can bring people together at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So what we would like to see as a language that is not so much putting almost a hierarchy onto learning content, and it's almost instrumentalizing the way we approach education. So we there's always the question about a turnover, right? So there's investment in education, so what's the turnover? And we would like to see that is taken aback, because we see education as a fundamental right and not as some tool to manipulate people or to steer people in a direction. And this undertone of employability, upskilling, which in itself is not a bad thing. I'm not saying we are not supposed to support upskilling and reskilling. Obviously, that is a fantastic thing to do. But education cannot only be solely looked at in this way.
There's a powerful statement, but someone that we very much agree with. I feel that it should be a fundamental right, and it's something that we should promote stronger in a way. And for example, if you would like to share this as a message, as a call to action to the people that are listening to us, how would you frame it?
I would say, or would ask, that we maybe remember who we are doing this for. Okay, so embrace for some pathos, right? But I think it is important that we, working in the bubble,
yes,
and we can be honest about it, we sometimes tend to develop a little bit of a tunnel vision, right? So we're thinking about our problems and what we would like to achieve here in Brussels and beyond. And then sometimes it distracts a little bit from what are we talking about? We're talking about making education more accessible for everybody, right? And in this, we have to acknowledge that all forms of learning are valid and have the right to exist, because we have to pick up the learner where they're coming from. And this includes all the learners. So, and this goes a little bit back to what I just said about the instrumentalization of education. So we want people to be able to approach education for whatever goal they chose to, and not just for gaining more skills in this or that sector, but maybe for a little bit more of a self-fulfillment.
For the joy of it.
For the joy of it. Learning for learning as a means in itself. So that would be something I would say, if we could somehow manage to get this idea about learning ingrained on the European level, and then even better see that in the white papers and in the initiatives and in the programs, the idea of learning as a means in itself, that would be something.
That's an ambitious mission, but let's say that now it's out there, so we will follow up on that. We will continue working also in 2025 for all of this, and throughout the new years, and with the new commission that is being established. So this is an important statement for us. For our members or audience that is listening to us, how would you like to stay in contact with the EAEA activities? I believe that, for example, the award or other events that you are organizing.
Absolutely. So if you want to dive further into adult education and learning, I would definitely recommend, and I have to say that, to go to see the EAEA website. So although we are operating on a very policy level, we have plenty of projects that are aiming at the grassroots level. So we do develop tools and guidelines that can be immediately implemented by whoever works in ALE or is interested in the topic. And that would be a good starting point if you just want to dive in and see a couple of our projects. We also have our own podcast, which is already in season 3, I might brag. And
it's perfectly proportioned between the 70 years of the EAEA
it is
and
actually.
the BB 30 years. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, there you go. There goes that. But if you want to learn even more about adult education, you could also go and see for EPALE, which is the European platform for adult learning and education, and it's the official platform from the European Commission. But they have an ocean of information. They have so many things going on. They have live discussions, they have blog posts, they have even project partner finding tools. So you might want to already know what you're looking for when you go there, because there's so much. And if you're looking for some concrete courses or MOOCs, you might want to go to EU Academy and see if you can find an online course that you're interested in, and then be a learner yourself. So that's something I would recommend in terms of what we are doing, we are soon launching our call for our next Grundtvig Award, which next year is on flexible learning pathways. So if you have a project that is going in that direction, and if that's dedicated to flexible learning pathways, you might want to consider applying for our Grundtvig Award. And then we also have our ABC for ALE, Adult Learning and Education, where we invite a selected group of stakeholders to Brussels to spend the better half of a week with us here on workshops, meeting stakeholders from the EU, and just working on a couple of adult learning questions, and maybe establish themselves a little bit as adult education experts.
Lovely, Christin. Really, so many initiatives going on. So the invitation is now open, perhaps also for a podcast at the EAEA in the future, who knows. But no, really, thank you a lot for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
And yes, so thanks also to our audience for staying with us also today. Christin Cieslak from the EAEA.
Thank you very much.
See you next episode.